Well, let's talk about how much more expensive it's become to live in Colorado Springs and Colorado as a non-homeowner, and when did we start to see rent prices soar?
Really, the Colorado Springs economy started to take off in about 2014, and that's when you saw rental prices start to come up, but it's really accelerated in the last couple of years. So as an example, you can see that the sort of average rent for a two-bedroom apartment in Colorado Springs is now a little over $1,000 per month, so $1,020. And if we follow the rule of thumb of 30% of household income being spent on rent, that person, that renter, needs to make almost $41,000 a year. But here's the problem. The minimum wage in the state of Colorado is $10.20 an hour. However, for this lease rate, the two-bedroom renter wage needs to be about double that, almost $20 an hour, so $19.62 per hour. But the average renter only makes about $15 an hour. So instead of making this $41,000, they're making about $31,000. So there's a shortfall of about $10,000 a year. And of course, that doesn't even include some of the other things like cable TV and so forth. And then if you look at it another way, this average renter would need to work 77 hours at the minimum wage in order to afford your average two-bedroom apartment. And it's really, this $1,000 is even a little bit of an understatement, because that's your average, including all rental units, regardless of location, regardless of how old it is. That amount actually goes up to $1,400 a month for the newer units, and newer is defined as 2010, built in 2010 or more recently. So it really is amazing when you step back and you look at this and you say, it's kind of like salmon swimming upstream. These renters are having a very difficult time not only paying their monthly expenses, especially housing, but then what about also saving up, right, for that American dream? And that is a trend that we have seen both in apartment lease rates, but also in single-family housing. Now, we are still quite a bit more affordable than Denver and Colorado Springs, and we can look at the Colorado numbers, but we're trending in the wrong direction, unfortunately.
What's the range we're seeing as far as rent goes? What's the lowest we're seeing, and what's that highest price?
Well, I don't have specific numbers, but the last time I looked at that data, sort of the least expensive is 800 plus, so 850, 860, and then going up to all the way 1400. But here's the conundrum with new construction. So, obviously the newer apartments are more expensive, but those are also the types of apartments that are being built. And why? Well, because they're the most profitable. And of course, it is a for-profit business, construction, so, that's part of what's also fueling this trend. We're also seeing that trend in home ownership. So, all of the recent attention to affordability for home ownership also, is victim sort of the same type of thing, where builders, it's not really affordable for them to build a house that's 180 or 200,000. Their starting points tend to be more in the 400,000 range. So again, squeezing out future homeowners.
You mentioned 2014 is when we started to see prices increase, correct? Right. Do you know about how much per year it's been going up percentage-wise?
So single-family housing to own has last year went up almost 11%, which is about double the national average. For lease rates, it really varies on the type of unit that you're looking at, but we've seen at least that amount of appreciation in terms of rental units.
Why is this happening?
Well, it's a combination of things. Part of it is the economy is really good, which is a wonderful thing, but unfortunately wages have not really kept pace with how much more expensive housing has become. We're also seeing a little bit of an influx from Denver Boulder, which is more expensive, and even though we are, our numbers are going up, we're still relatively more affordable, but that just increases local demand as well. So it's the simple supply and demand that as demand goes up, of course, prices are going to go up as well.
How is this affecting people, lower class, middle class?
Well, of course, people who tend to rent tend to be people who don't have enough for the down payment. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. So those are the individuals that probably need the affordable housing and need to be making, at least the $19, $20 an hour. But they are typically your lower, middle or lower skill people who aren't making quite that amount. Now, some people, it is true, it's a trend, especially for millennials, to not want to commit to a home, and some of them can indeed afford this, but that's not really the rule. That's the exception.
For these people making, in this area, that 10, 20, 15, 09, it almost feels like they're never going to be able to catch up.
Well, that's part of the problem. I mean, my cohort, for instance, talks about, how do we help our kids, afford something down the road? And I have various peers who say, I save up my money so I can give my child X amount towards a down payment, and that's really what it takes. And student loans have a lot to do with it as well. The average student loan is now pushing about $40,000 per year.
Wow.
Colorado is the other one.
If you want to
mention it, we can just touch upon the fact that this number is even higher, because it's pushed up by Denver Boulder. And one thing I didn't mention as well, another thing that's pushing up costs, is that new construction is incredibly expensive, because of the trends, but construction in general for multifamily and single family has gone up, and one of the largest drivers of that is actually the tariff that Trump put on the lumber industry. A lot of the lumber coming from Canada suddenly became a lot more expensive, and then of course labor costs have also gone up and so forth. So it's a bunch of different things at once in terms of new construction.
Sure. Should we move on to the next
Sure.
one? Okay.
Okay. So same as Colorado Springs. Renting an apartment is very expensive, but these numbers are even higher for the state of Colorado because Denver Boulder, is where most of our population is, although El Paso County is going to become the most populated county soon. So the average renter for a 2-bedroom apartment needs to make about $50,000 almost, $49,780 annually. That translates to about $24 an hour, or about $4,000 per month, which of course most young people don't make quite that amount. And that's again for that rule of thumb for about 30% of housing. So of course minimum wage is $10.20. The average renter wage for the entire state of Colorado, driven up by Denver Boulder, is a little higher than Colorado Springs, $17.59. But again, the chasm here is also greater in terms of what they need to make. They need to make almost $24,000. And the only other thing I'll mention here too is that the percentage of renters in the state of Colorado is pretty high because we have a lot of young people. It's 36%, and in Colorado Springs MSA, it's even a little higher at 37%.
Okay. We are not in the most expensive area yet, El Paso County.
No,
Okay.
no, thankfully not. And then, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, the average Colorado Springs renter for a 2-bedroom apartment needs to have 1.9 jobs, so they need to work almost double. It's even a little bit higher in the entire state of Colorado. They need to have 2.3 full-time jobs in order to afford and stay within that 30% range of their total income.
What's the estimate as far as when El Paso County is going to become the most populated?
It's still a little ways away. It's about 2040, but we're moving there very quickly. In fact, the state demographer's office just came out with the latest numbers, and the millennial population that was increasing so rapidly in the Denver area is now leveling off because the millennials are actually starting to leave the area, sometimes going to other states, but a lot of them are also moving to, especially the north side of Colorado Springs. So the trends, may end up moving a little bit more quickly than we thought, simply because of affordability.
Could we be on this list?
Absolutely.
Come 2040?
Absolutely, we could. Yeah, and you can see. I mean, some of these are also communities that are sort of recreational. Whereas I think of El Paso County and Denver County as sort of your average working. So this is a little bit skewed.
Anything else you want to add, or maybe what people are turning to instead of renting or owning a home? I've heard some people say, I moved into a camper to so I don't have to pay so much.
Yeah, well, I've been part of some affordable housing panels. I mean, thankfully, our community is looking at this very carefully, as are most across the country. But you know, my conclusion in researching this is that there isn't one solution. It's an and solution. We need to look at tiny homes, and we need to look at subsidies potentially for builders, and we need to look at associations like the Home Builders Association and what they can do as a sort of coalition to incentivize builders to build more affordable housing. There are a lot of different strategies that are out there.
Is it really just the fact that more people are moving here? They know, I guess, landlords, apartments, they know they can charge this much money because people want to live here.
That's right. That's the unfortunate part. And you know, it is a sort of rule of thumb in economics, unfortunately, that when you start to see some of these negative trends, they kind of feed each other. So you have more people who can't afford, who are kind of locked into leasing and not being able to make that leap to buying a home.
All right. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Thanks,
All right.
guys.